So let's go ahead and get started. Dr. Amora, welcome to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I am your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife and producer, Janet. And today we are recording a show because Janet and I will be out of town. So we will be playing this. This will not be a live show. It'll be great to have Dr. Amora on. And we can save our questions for next time. So Dr. Shawn Amora, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I'm a physician, and I grew up in Washington, D.C. Was a suburb of the Washington, D.C. area. My dad was a government servant and went to public schools and then did a couple years at community college studying criminal justice, and then transferred to Penn State University, continued my studies in criminal justice. After I finished Penn State University, I went on to work in law enforcement. Actually, during college, I worked as a police officer too, and then entered undercover narcotics work for narcotics strike force, and did also organized crime task force undercover in both positions. And ultimately couldn't get away from my interest in science and medicine. So I decided to apply to medical school. And at that point, I owed so much in undergraduate and law school loans that I decided to pursue a scholarship through the Army. Having been a police officer, I figured I could be a soldier physician. And so I got a scholarship through the U.S. Army to attend Temple University Medical School. After finishing law school at Villanova University, I stayed in the Philadelphia area. And after finishing medical school at Temple, I went on to specialize in emergency medicine, trained for 4 years in emergency medicine, and trained at Brooke Army Medical Center down in San Antonio, Texas, and work for the past year with a handful of executive clients and professional athletes that are interested in improving their health, but more importantly, improving their performance.
Talk a little bit more about the concierge medicine that you started in Korea, or it's kind of where you started with VPs and stuff.
Yeah. So while in Korea, I was chief of Department of Emergency Medicine for the U.S. Army hospitals out there. And part of my responsibilities was to provide medical support to visiting dignitaries. So I got experience taking care of the vice president, U.S. vice president, former presidents. We provide this high-end support to what we call the senior executive service, and then other foreign dignitaries coming to Korea. I can see the idea of like, hey, we should set up a company providing concierge medical care to like very wealthy private citizens, to give them kind of the same care that the vice presidents and presidents and senior executive service of other countries. So we set up a very high-end concierge medical practice that I founded back in 2007, and we provide care to former occupants of the White House and to 52 billionaires. And it was really interesting because they were kind of the ultimate source of kind of funding. So any really good idea that you came up with would get funded by them if they thought it was a good idea and they liked it. So we were building very sophisticated hospital-grade medical systems in their homes, underground, in their yachts, and even like ultra-luxury big motor coach homes, buses. And it was really fascinating, but in building all that capabilities, it kind of challenged me to think as an emergency medicine doctor and creatively, how else could you use that equipment instead of waiting for them to have a heart attack or a stroke? Could you use that equipment to maybe prevent them from having it? So I started rethinking about, higher yield and a better return on this pre-placed, medical capability. And I realized that all that capability is really set up, doesn't really prevent things. Right. But you could think about that, but we were really good at responding to strokes. But really, what prevents things are changes in your lifestyle. So ultimately, I abandoned all that hardware and software systems of concierge medicine and entered the world of research, looking at different interventions, I call them now, basically lifestyle choices, what can you do in your life to help the disease process be reversed inside human beings and really to prevent medical problems in the first place? And that what I found out is my passion. My passion and purpose in life is to help people that really want to get healthy and really perform better, really get healthy and really perform better. So
Right.
that's what I spend most of my creative energy thinking about and trying to do with individuals. And I love it. It's the most rewarding work I have ever been involved with in my 56 years of living.
That's awesome to hear. So, speaking of studies, we can make it quick. This is kind of how you and I contacted each other. I had Dr. Sean Baker, from the author of the Carnivore Diet, on my show a few weeks ago, and he put out a message on Instagram that you were looking for twins to study regarding the carnivore diet. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I got interested in the concept of, for a long time as physicians, we've known the value of studying particularly identical twins, monozygotic twins. And at the time, there were a couple twins in the National Guard that were monozygotic identical twins. And one of them was interested in eating carnivore and the other one wasn't and was just eating carbs. And I thought, how fascinating. It'd be interesting to see what difference that would make in their different ways of eating, to study them in the manners and using the biomarkers that we do, which is through MRI quantification. And so we scanned both of them, and they both were very healthy. And the intention was to track the difference in their diets measured by fat to muscle ratios. But unfortunately, these two individuals they're both too busy to return and follow up and do scans. And that's part of the challenge of science. You got to find a population of people willing to
Right.
donate themselves that can conveniently be studied. So we're still looking for identical twins in the Minneapolis area that would be willing to be scanned about once a month to track muscle to fat ratios, that would be interested in trying a carnivore diet and a carbohydrate diet. So that study is a work in progress, and I'm going to
Good.
be contacting hopefully the National Twin Registry to look for various different studies. They're looking at monozygotic twins, contact maybe individually twins that may have already been included in twin studies that might be willing to look at that diet. But yeah, it's a fascinating area to look at, monozygotic twins. And it would be perfect to continue to study the difference between the carnivore diet and somebody eating maybe the standard American diet, especially.
Well, my brother and I were super excited to be a part of it. But yeah, since we're not in the Minneapolis area, it would be kind of difficult because you need to do MRIs every 3 weeks or something,
Yeah,
correct?
about once a month ideally
Okay.
would
Yeah.
be,
So, so tell me a little bit. You talked a little bit about health optimization. Will you explain a little bit more about health optimization and
Sure.
what that is?
So health optimization is really taking the concept of people who want to get healthy and expanding their level of motivation, and more importantly, their ability to kind of look at the end point of that and say, really, there is no end point. The ability to optimize your health is kind of the new infinite frontier that we don't know to what extent we can actually optimize the health of somebody. Because in my opinion, I don't think it's ever really been done. But that's the most exciting area of science that I think that is available to us, not so much space or the ocean and these other areas that typically people think about. But I actually think it's how healthy you can get somebody. So as a health optimizing and performance optimizing physician, I look to what what are we able of achieving within Homo sapiens to actually improve their health if we looked at all the various different decisions that people could make, and you looked at all the various different information, biomarkers and metrics to follow, and you made a concerted effort, how would that impact those individuals' lives in terms of how healthy you could get them? And also more, I think, equally important, how much better could you get them performing? And I think that's a super exciting area. And I'd like to promote that area because I think if we can do that, the ability to impact and improve our country and improve the population of people across the board is almost without limit. And so for that reason, I try to look for opportunities to talk to community groups and do podcasts and radio shows about this concept of health optimization because I think it has so much to offer our country.
So one of these, you speak of biomarkers, and I agree with you 100%. I think it's the future. What we're doing in our healthcare system is not working now, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But you talked about biomarkers. Is one of these biomarkers visceral fat? That's one thing that you think is really, really important, correct?
I do. I think visceral fat is probably the most valuable biomarker to follow and is probably one of the least well known. There's, increasing, I think, vague knowledge about belly fat and deep belly fat. It's the kind of fat that kills you. And we've, kind of heard that discussed for several years, but nobody really knows how to measure it very well. There's a scan out there, technology called DEXA scan, which is about $100. You can get a DEXA scan, which will give you a quantified amount of DEXA fat you have in your body. And it does image it a little bit, but really poor because it gives you a longitudinal perspective of what that visceral fat might look like. So it's not very compelling to take a look at. But when you do something like a CT scan or an MRI scan, it allows you to get like a cross section, through somebody, in a cross section plane, and that gives you a much better look at the amount of visceral fat and what that actually looks like inside of you. And the problems with the CT scanner is it uses a lot of radiation, and the DEXA scan uses radiation too, but not quite as much as the CT scanner. But the MRI doesn't use any radiation, it just uses magnetic fields. And so in our practice, since we have our own scanner built into our practice, we can scan people literally every day if we want to, and track these differences. And we've seen visceral fat accumulate and change in the course of just a weekend. So we can scan somebody on Friday. They can do something different, either fast or can do something harmful, like go to a wedding and eat a lot of carbohydrates, and bring it back on Monday, and we'll show them where their visceral fat has changed. So it's a really sensitive technology that's useful to follow that biomarker. From a research standpoint, really rich in what's called a signal to noise ratio. So what that means is it's got a high yield. There's a lot of relevance to that biomarker. So I like to contrast it to cholesterol. Cholesterol has very low signal to noise ratio. That's why when you take a look at it, look at the data, you find there's a lot of disparate and competing results when it comes to cholesterol being either eliminated or increased. So, the average person that has their first heart attack has actually normal levels of cholesterol, yet they're having heart attacks. And then we see studies that show the people that have the lowest mortality when they have a heart attack actually have the lowest amount of cholesterol. So you got a whole country and doctors filled filling the healthcare system with objectives to try to eliminate cholesterol, and to what gain? But if you eliminate visceral fat, you eliminate much of the associated disease processes that are connected to visceral fat, like namely chronic disease, of which that includes life-threatening diseases like heart attacks and strokes and cancer. So there's no amount of visceral fat that you want.
So there's no benefit.
Every ounce of it.
There's no benefit of visceral fat in our bodies, is what you're saying.
No.
Right.
No benefit whatsoever.
Right. So, and of course, we know without cholesterol, we'll die. I mean, cholesterol is necessary.
Right.
And we also know that, the statins have been out for 30 plus years, yet cardiovascular disease is at an all-time high, and almost everybody's on a statin. I'm exaggerating. So what we're doing is not working. It's not about cholesterol. Is that what you're saying?
That's it. That's exactly right. And I like to point out, if it's such an important objective, uh, you never see any direct benefit. I mean, who do you know ever runs around saying, I went to my doctor and I got my cholesterol under control and it completely changed my life. But that's what happens when you lose visceral fat. You
You're right. That's great. I've never heard that.
Yeah, well, if you get rid of visceral fat, that signal to noise ratio is so high, it will change your life. Particularly if you're walking around with a lot of visceral fat, and then you go down to no visceral fat. That's about as big of a life-changing biological event as you could possibly have, and it's all for the better. So I really think it's important for physicians and health proponents to educate people about this terrible condition, visceral fat, substance inside your body, to tell them, one, how to measure it, and two, how to get rid of it. And that's the other thing I think, unfortunately, a lot of physicians and healthcare providers are very poor at getting rid of visceral fat because they don't really know how to get rid of it. They don't know how to measure it. And it's not something that's being promoted by the conventional healthcare system because I don't want to be conspiratorial, but it begins to cut into profits. If you've got a system that is always treating disease, and then you find a highly effective biomarker that eradicates disease when it's eliminated, don't expect big pharma, insurance companies, or healthcare systems to get behind that which is going to directly undermine their revenue. And their purpose for existence is not to get you healthy, but it's to generate profits. So there's a strong conflict of interest, I think, that belies the lack of interest and appetite, unfortunately, that healthcare systems, insurance companies, and the pharmaceutical industry might otherwise have for visceral fat. Now, maybe if Big Pharma could figure out a pill that would get rid of visceral fat, they'd probably get behind that. But then it would undermine all their abilities to generate revenue from all the other medications they get. So my guess,
Right.
Let me speak to you right now. Big Pharma, I bet you know, one of you are trying to figure out a pharmacological solution to visceral fat. Because why? Because your actuarials who look at that realize then we're going to lose revenue.
Right.
So if you're in that particular space and you say, that doctor figured that out, maybe it's time you think about getting out of the particular industry that you're in and join us on the health optimization side, people that are really trying to get people healthy and help us do that. There are people beginning to lead the pharmaceutical industry, but I bet you I'm spot on. I just thought of that, but I bet you they're not even looking at that target because they're just going to lose money.
I agree with you. And think about this, is that there is no diagnosis code for healing, right? I mean, we are in a sick care system. That's how the system generally generates money. So there are a lot of people that do not want people to get healthy. And those are just the facts. So that's why, folks like yourself have to get out there and educate and empower patients, empower people, and empower other healthcare providers that there's a different way. It does not have to be this sick care system. And speaking of that, you speak of chronic disease in our country. Tell us about the cost. You've talked about the costs of chronic disease in this country. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So in my opinion, what I like to talk about when I speak to community groups and organizations about chronic disease and health optimization is that it's our country's biggest problem. And the reason why I say that in justification of that position, and I think we ought to pay attention to our problems. We hear discussion about all sorts of problems, but nobody's talking about our biggest one. And the biggest one is by far, unassailably, the largest problem in our country is chronic disease from a standpoint of money. First of all, $3.8 trillion a year we spend on chronic disease.
And that's direct cost, correct?
Yeah, that's
imagine the indirect costs, lost productivity, and so on.
Exactly. Before even going beyond those factors, just direct costs. And oh, by the way, every one of those dollars is preventable. It's just money we're wasting. It's not like it's for food or water, which you can't prevent. You need money to be able to do those things. They're cost associated. But chronic disease, is something that we tolerate. We waste $3.8 trillion a year. And then you're exactly right. No other problem will ruin more lives. A decrease in the quality of life. So people's quality of life is ruined, and their productivity and performance is degraded as a consequence
Absolutely.
of that. So no
Yep.
one's really been able to accurately, that's been kind of estimated, but just imagine how much more money that gets added to this particular, the magnitude of this problem. And then finally, as if those criteria aren't already bad enough, nothing kills more people than chronic disease. And who even thinks about it?
Right.
And who
So,
is working this problem in our government
right.
and the healthcare system? Nobody, except they're exploiting it to make money.
Absolutely. And so give us some examples. Chronic disease is a pretty broad term. Give us some examples of these chronic diseases.
Well, what's interesting is that we haven't done a lot of studies, specifically looking at the exact, causes of chronic disease. In my opinion, it's just not something that people want to track from a preventive standpoint and measure and draw any more attention to, other than we can exploit it and make a lot of money. But visceral fat has a lot associated to chronic disease. But if you look at the studies, and there's a paucity of these studies, I think we need to do a lot more. It has been our experience that we've scanned over 4,000 people, adults coming in that have a variety of different chronic disease. And we have yet to find a single condition that did not improve with the elimination or reduction of visceral fat.
Okay.
So just improving the chronic disease burden within people, or visceral fat and contributions to it, seems to improve every form of chronic disease. And there's a huge amount. There's arthritis, there's tendonitis, there's bursitis, there's gastroesophageal reflux, there's myocardial infarctions, heart attacks, strokes, memory impairment, virtually almost anything that goes wrong with the body short of trauma is basically a disease process which is accelerated and worsened by visceral fat and it's really nothing more than a product of poor lifestyle choices, which unfortunately exists only because people are not educated. We don't do enough with the ability to try to inform people and educate people. You still have, people making, terrible decisions about what they should eat and what they shouldn't be eating and how they should be conducting their lives. And in the year 2020, when we possess so much amazing developed knowledge about so many particular areas, when it comes to something as simple as how do you live your life, that we're so incredibly inept. And for those, for your audience listening, I would submit 30,000 years ago, we had it down in spades. We knew exactly how to live. We paid attention to how we lived. We had traditions that improved our performance and allowed us to hunt and gather very well. And today we've lost that. Other objectives that come in, it's other important things. Instead of just being really great at hunting and gathering, we now try to be really good as attorneys, as radio broadcasters, as accountants,
Yep.
basketball coaches, engineers, but nobody really focuses on the basics, which is becoming really good at hunting and gathering. But if we change that approach and got people back into what it is that optimize the hunting and gathering, that doesn't mean you have to go out and hunt and gather, but just getting those fundamentals on what makes you a better hunter gatherer, then you'd be a better accountant, you'd be a better attorney, you'd be a better electrician, you'd be a better, Uber driver, or painter, or what artist, whatever you do. As you improve the biology of a person, they actually perform better and have a better quality of life. So that's why I think it's terribly important. I can't think of anything that has the capacity as much for positively improving and impacting across the board everybody's life and everybody's vocation, everything they do, than just optimizing health. and yet almost nobody knows about it.
Yeah. Well, that's why we need to get the word out. So visceral fat, I mean, I'm assuming that's going to affect type 2 diabetes, right? Or, I don't know if I want to say
Absolutely.
cause it, but there's a link is what to that disease too, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So the things that reverse visceral fat actually reverse type 2 diabetes and improves many other chronic disease processes. Visceral fat, some of the things that, I'll just jump ahead and you probably would wonder, your audience is probably, well, what the heck I got to do to get rid of visceral fat?
Right.
Well,
And you know
one of
what?
the,
Go ahead and explain to our audience what is visceral fat. You say
yeah,
it does no good in the body. Explain what it is.
Yeah, so visceral fat is the deep fat that's within your abdomen, which you don't know about. So most people, when it comes to like belly fat, they'll grab their belly, they'll like roll a fat on their high part of their abdomen and grab like the pinch the inch kind of fat. But that's subcutaneous fat. That's fat right underneath your skin that people can readily see and feel. Visceral fat is fat that's deep in the abdomen, surrounding your organs. It's around your liver. It's around your intestines. It's dispersed throughout your abdominal cavity, and that fat is very dangerous and different from the type of fat that's just underneath the skin especially because of what it produces. It releases highly inflammatory molecules called cytokines, and these molecules get because of their close proximity to the portal vein, get absorbed, within your vascular system to be distributed throughout your body and all different tissue bodies, bodies of tissue throughout your whole existence. And so literally it's affecting your distal tips of your toenails, turning them yellow, as well as tissue really close, like around in your heart and just your intestines. So this inflammatory, distribution of these damaging molecules throughout your body just promote and cause disease. And as we said earlier, there's no benefit conferred by it. So you should really purpose as a human being to first understand how much visceral fat you have in your body so that you've got a problem. So you're motivated, because most people aren't motivated. It's like the hidden problem they don't know about. So they're in denial, and there's a lack of initiative on their part to do anything to change their lives to get rid of that visceral fat. But that's exactly what they should do. It's what you want to do. It's the enemy inside you. I tell people he's inside your wire and you don't even know it. It's like a bad guy in your backyard with a Glock pointing right up at your head, and you're just
Right.
not even aware of it.
Yeah. So you started to go into how to get rid of it. Is that something that we have time for real quick?
Yeah. So what I would get into, and there's a lot of things, the more you do to optimize your health, the more visceral fat gets vanquished from your body. But I would say it starts with chiefly what you eat, and more importantly, what you don't eat. So you don't want to be eating carbohydrates, and you don't want to especially process carbohydrates. And so the two big things I get people to do is predominantly eat meat. I've looked at many scans, and the people that do the best, get the best results of reducing visceral fat, go
Yeah.
carnivore
Right.
and eliminate carbohydrates, and also adopt fasting. And so normalizing your blood sugars so that you don't have a lot of spikes in frequency and amplitude of blood sugars
Yeah.
by typically eating like one meal a day is great, and some extended fasting, and then eliminating carbohydrates and eating more protein and healthy fats are the strategies that I see are most effective at eliminating visceral fat.
And so talk about a little bit about intermittent fasting, and is it 12 hours of fasting, 18 hours, 24 hours? I know there's all kinds of different ideas about it. So what do you recommend?
So what I like to say is, I always look back at trying to figure out what we need to do today by looking back what worked well and what has nature always provided. So nature
Right.
didn't do a schedule. Nature provided variability. So when it comes to fasting, I tell people to mix it up. Sometimes
Okay.
you would be fasting maybe just once a day. I mean, it would be hard. It would be hard to imagine that a hunter-gatherer society would go out and hunt and eat an animal every single day. That's a lot of meat to be consuming.
Right.
So
Right.
basically, and it's a lot of work, to go out and hunt and gather. So basically, you hunt when you get hungry, not when you're full, or maybe when opportunity would come around. So sometimes that would be shorter periods of time, sometimes it'd be longer. So I get my clients, I try to get them slowly to fast, because if you get them too fast into it, they fall away. And so
Right.
you have to have effective strategy so people don't get discouraged. And I
Yeah.
slowly increase periods of time they're fasting so they can comfortably promote or adopt a lifestyle of fasting for longer periods of time. So ideally, I like to see people fasting kind of one meal a day, that they break it down into a big meal during maybe a 2-hour period of time. And then extended fasting, and try to get people to fast ideally about 2 to 3 days worth of extended fasting. And I'd like to see that done at least for 2 weekends out of the month. Weekends work well because kind of modern lifestyles, it's kind of a nice time to fast, or at least ultimately you should be fasting somewhere between, in my opinion, about 4 to 12 days out of the month. You shouldn't be eating any calories during that time. And I think having a kind of a variety approach, you might try doing a 6-day fast and then only doing a 1-day fast and mixing it up that way. But I think nature wants variety. And ultimately, as that visceral fat gets removed from the body, you see people's faces becoming so much more healthier, by reducing those blood sugars. And this, if you're listening to this, what I want you to pay attention to are people who fast, who do carnivore, and watch what happens with their faces compared to, over a long period of time, compared to people who do the opposite, eat a lot of food very frequently, a lot of carbohydrates, and it's unfortunately, it's what a lot of vegans do, and their faces
Right.
become inflamed. So I see, and particularly long-term vegans, a large amount of inflammation in their face and a lot of visceral fat. So when we scan vegans, because of those elevated blood sugars that they're constantly snacking on vegetation all the time, they might be thin on the outside but fat on the inside. We call them tofis, and they have elevated amounts of visceral fat. So I encourage you, if you're a vegan, to get a visceral fat scan, see what's going on, and watch. Stay vegan, but repeat it and see
Yeah.
if it's getting better, if it's getting worse. But don't follow cholesterol. What are you following? You got to follow the right things. And so biologically, you don't need labs, you don't need MRIs. 2 things you need: a healthy looking face, a healthy looking body that performs well. And if that's not happening to you, if your face isn't getting healthy, your body's not getting healthy, and you're not performing better, even when you're getting older, like 10 years older, you're on the wrong diet. And so
Absolutely. And when
it's
you,
appearance and
yeah,
performance that reflects how well we're eating the correct diet.
absolutely. And you know this well enough that you can usually spot a vegan when you see them. They're vegan right away because they usually don't have, even if they're thin, they don't have a lot of lean body mass. That's usually true, and they look kind of pasty because they're a lot of times they're iron deficient. Do you find that?
Oh, I do. I
Yeah.
do. I am actually starting to collect, facial photographs of vegans, that I get off the internet. And sarcopenia is accelerated by veganism. A vegan lifestyle without choline and without creatine is just and B12 and the other nutrients that vegans are deficient in. It accelerates muscle atrophy, muscle wasting, and the MRI clearly shows us their fat to muscle ratios are poor. And here's the biggest thing: they get pencil necks. They get these.
Yep.
They get berry scab. Call them ants. They look at long-term vegans. They wear shirts because the older vegans have been 20, 30 years, don't want to show off their bodies anymore. Their muscles in their neck are atrophying relative to their head, so little tiny necks. And so people joke about Representative Adam Schiff, the congressman. They call him pencil neck Schiff because he's got this thing next, but it's veganism. And
I didn't
I'm
know
not
that.
trying to disparage them.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing out, and Al Sharpton, he looks like he's got this big head and a little tiny skinny neck, and these are kind of famous individuals that you can find, easily. But it's not the young healthy people that just go vegan. It's the young person that went vegan 20 years ago, and
Right.
then look at this atrophy and sarcopenia that sets in, and the higher degree of inflammation in their face. They have an older look to them, and now, of course there's a few exceptions, and there are going to be some better ones in the low carb community too as well. But it's the masses, the larger numbers that we need to look at. So I want to see a carnivore versus vegan diet. I'd love to see the biomarkers looking at, and particularly the MRI. And you could just do it all with just the faces. Artificial intelligence in the future are going to data mine Facebook, LinkedIn, and other social media accounts. They'll look at the faces of the people and what they're writing about in unstructured data. They're following this diet or that.
Mm-hmm.
And the machine is going to be able to determine everybody eats a low carb diet, has healthier looking faces. And the machine will be able to say, this person's keto, this person's carnivore, this person's vegan, this person's vegetarian, just because they'll be able to discern that. You and I can't do that just yet, although I'm getting pretty good at it. The machines, computer, artificial intelligence are really going to get that down. So the healthcare of the future are going to be computers, just looking at photographs predominantly. And I think you're going to see a lot of that development in the near future.
That's exciting. So, as you know, I think this always kind of our healthcare system always turns political, and I think mostly because the government has made it political. And the reason they do that, I believe, is so they can control us. And that's why it's important for us to, educate and empower consumers that they do not have to be part of the system. They can get away from that system, and they are in charge of their healthcare, not some government program, not some insurance company, but they're ultimately in charge. And you had a great analogy when we were talking in a pre-conference call about why you don't ever think the system is going to fix itself, especially the insurance-based system. And you had an analogy with Google and a self-driving car. Will you go into that, please?
Yeah, sure. So Google, their first generation of a driverless operating systems, had the capacity of looking 250 feet, and it would do that in every direction, 360 degrees, and it did it 60 times a second. So they quickly realized that you could infer from that computers were going to be far more effective at operating cars than humans, and eventually it's going to be illegal for these things to operate cars. Human hands are just not going to do that. So you would think the logical application for that technology is to take that to the people that got the pain point, whose problem that is. Well, who pays for, has got the biggest exposure when a car crashes are automobile industry, so insurance companies. So insurance companies have to pay these bills, but with the onset of driverless operating systems, it's become apparent to the auto insurance industry that in the near future, you're going to see driverless operating systems reducing the cost of auto insurance down to about $35 a year. Those policies are going to be so cheap. So the auto industry is done in the future. And so they're all quickly migrating to other strategies, lest they become blockbusters. Because if no one crashes their car because the cars are so safe, no one gets hurt, no property gets damaged. So the cost of these policies are too cheap. And so that's why auto insurance industry is dramatically changing, and they never would want and get behind driverless operating systems. And that's why you will never see health insurance companies get behind reversal of disease and health optimization, because it will undermine the amount of disease and the revenue they have. They won't be able to sell their healthcare policies for very much money. And you're going to see humans so healthy that health insurance, in theory, could go down to probably like $50 or $100 a year as well if we could eliminate that chronic disease, because you don't have to pay for a fracture in a football game or some kind of sporting event instead of the trillions of dollars we're now spending. And so it's the policy that they make money from. And so more disease, more chronic disease, more you can charge for that policy. They are actually motivated to sustain high levels of disease. So Don't be
Yeah.
deluded and into thinking that your insurance company is on your side to get you healthy. They exist for one reason, to maximize the profit for the shareholders. That's why they're there. They shouldn't even have that term health. It should be profit optimization that they're working for.
Right. And that's great. That's a great analogy. I've never heard that. And it's perfect. And it is true. The insurance company is in bed with the government regulators to create these things so they can charge $1,500 a month for some kind of family health policy that is a complete ripoff, complete scam. When in reality, if you kept yourself healthy in general, you would probably hardly ever, like besides in a trauma or whatever, hardly ever need health insurance. Like you say, it's really not health insurance.
Yep, their discussions are centered around revenue.
Yeah.
Members' payment per month. All the executives in major health insurance always talk about members' payment per month, want the revenue. Not like, how are we doing with our clients? How are we improving their health? No, how much money are we making? Members' payment per month. If you're involved in the healthcare industry, that's what you guys are talking about. You've got a conflict of interest. And if you care about humanity, you join us on the light side here to reduce disease and improve human performance and the quality of life for everybody.
Well, and I will also say that, um, you know, healthcare providers that are in the system, in that insurance-based system, in that government-based model system, I'm taking a quote from Dr. Keith Smith from the Surgery Center of Oklahoma. And he said that when he was doing it, when he was in that system, he felt like an accessory to the crime. And I got to say, one of the reasons my wife and I got out of it in our pharmacy was because we were enabling the system. We were perpetuating the system. So, one of the things I do in my book, I wrote a book and it's available on Kindle on Amazon, and it's called Sickened: How the Government Ruined Healthcare and How to Fix It. And there's a stepped approach about how to fix it. And one of the things is that healthcare providers have to be empowered to educate and empower their patients and get out of the system, because the system would not survive if patients and healthcare providers were educated that it's not gonna, you're not helping people. You're really not. You're keeping people sick.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think direct primary care, that is a
Absolutely.
DPC model that's grown in popularity, is a great model. And I've heard Dr. Smith speak. But one of the things I think, to your point, is that's what we need to do. The physicians out there, first of all, they need to become aware of that direct pay model that's available for them to have that kind of a alternative to the conventional system. But I challenge you, as you do that, to figure out ways that your revenue includes where you are incentivized to make your clients better. The longer my clients spend time with me, the more awesome and better they are throughout the years. I've been doing health optimization on myself for 12 years. I have never, ever been more healthy, better performing
Awesome.
than at the age I am today. And I have no idea when it's going to stop. And that's what we should be selling to clients, the opportunities to. Don't buy the fact that when you get old that you're going to be decreasing performance.
Nope.
No, that's a lie. It's deception. It's just the conventional approach to it. You should become increasingly more awesome. And oh, by the way, all of the knowledge and experience you have combined with the absence of disease is going to have you way better performing in your 50s and 60s and 70s. I think the football players, professional football players in the future are going to be just that, 50 and 60-year-old guys. The absence of disease, who can biologically perform extremely well with decades of experience playing the game, decades of experience being an attorney, decades of experience being an accountant or whatever you're doing without chronic disease. And we're going to take humanity to a new level. It's just we have to eradicate chronic disease by educating people. Lifestyle really matters. What you eat, what you don't eat, how you eat, when you eat, how you exercise, how much sunshine you get. All these stack on top of each other with synergistic benefits to make what literally are superhumans we haven't seen because it's just not out there. People lose a little weight, they do one thing. You get these experts are really deep on sleep, real experts really deep on sugar, diabetes. We have to get all of these things going lined up to get the synergistic benefit to have this incredible improvement in health and performance.
So tell me about creating a role model of the healthiest person in the world. Tell me what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the most important objectives to achieve right now. If you think about it, we have role models for everything: basketball players,
Mhm.
the best attorneys, the best engineers out there. We can point to the very best accountants. We can point to the very best surgeons, very best internal medicine doctors, the very best soccer players, very best swimmers. All of these different things. We have these metrics they've developed. And oh, by the way, when you started, zero. We didn't know what those metrics were. They developed because what happens is it creates a role model. Everybody starts going into it, and it self-sustains. Where is the role model for health optimization? Who is the healthiest man in the world? Who is the healthiest woman in the world? And that's what we need to create. If you're Amazon, you're Apple, that's the contest of the future. And I'm just going to spout. I used to think a super secret. Boom, right now, internet, this show. You create that model,
Yep.
you sell sponsorships to major corporations all over the country. Every corporation will want to get behind that because it's going to be one of the most attractive competitions out there because it's going to prove everybody. And you figure out why those people are healthy, what justifies that they're healthy, what their lifestyles are, and you're going to have people tuning in all over the country to get that kind of information. They'll follow the TV shows, they'll follow all of the competitions on this. It's going to draw out all the alphas, the most competitive people in the world. They're going to come on board and try to get named the healthiest people in the world because their pictures are going to be all over everything. They're going to be the most ultimate sponsors, associated with different products and services. So you sell those sponsorships to companies. They in turn turn around and get that data and that information and change their products and services. And if they don't, people buying from them. People stop, purchasing, buying their services and their products if they're not part of the world's healthiest man in the world competition. And you should do that for the healthiest 52-year-old, the healthiest 53-year-old. And, you could even subdivide it, the healthiest attorney, the healthiest physician, the healthiest basketball player. And you start doing that. Let's get our country into being super healthy. Everyone wants to be a basketball player. Everybody wants to be an accountant. Everybody wants to go make a lot of money. What if we turn this country into a country that said, what would it be like to be optimally healthy, without disease when I'm 50, 60 years old? That's what I want to create. That's what I'm trying to do. And, if you're interested, you like that idea, get a hold of me.
That's inspiring. So speaking of that, as we wrap this show up, what are your parting words for this podcast radio show?
Okay. So what I tell everybody, that if you're listening to this, I want you to grasp one concept. Of every physical asset out there that you could ever own, box of gold, a warehouse of gold, an enormous ocean liner filled with diamonds, all multiply it by 1,000. It all pales in comparison to one thing. Your physical asset that is most valued to you is your body. And as soon as you grasp that and you think about it, you'll start to realize that it's your body that defines how much you're going to enjoy or suffer every single circumstance in the future for the remainder of your life. That's what's going to define how much you're going to enjoy or suffer in your life. So take care of your body. It's your most important physical asset. That's where it begins. And then get deeply interested in what it is that improves the body. Because when you do, you'll improve performance and you improve your quality of life and your length of your life. People that want to live a long time aren't living their life. Right. I never want to die. I feel so awesome. My health has changed so much. I don't want to die. Every year it gets better. And that's what you will be too, if you understand that and get super interested in how to optimize that body.
So Dr. Shawn Amora, how is the best way that people can get a hold of you?
So I have a website that you can reach me, Medical Concierge Wellness. You can just go to www.medconwellness, or you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dr. Shawn Amora. That's just at DrSeanOmara. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Try to post and tweet every day some aspects, how to measure optimizing health, how to become optimally healthy, and because that's my passion. So I'd invite people that are interested in either becoming optimally healthy or really performing better, to get a hold of me. Looking for highly motivated alphas. And the reason why I want to go to that population, because the more motivated you are, the better you're going to be as a role model, rather than just starting with people that are just kind of dipping their toe in the pool. I want super motivated people. And if that's you, get a hold of me. I'm going to make you better.
Awesome. So we'll also have a link to that stuff in our show notes, so people can get a hold of you. And
By the way, too, Shawn, I'm not for profit. So I'm a big believer. I don't want to complain about profit, but I don't want anybody to think that profit is driving this. I'll tell you what's driving this. It's my passion in science, not profit. So I'm a not for profit.
It's very obvious that you have a passion for it, and I appreciate it. It comes out in your words when you're speaking. So super excited for you and all the patients that you can help, and just for people like yourself that want to get out there and educate and empower. And that's why we have this radio show, Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Is here to educate and empower patients and healthcare providers to help change the world of health. So we talk about all kinds of healthcare on this show. We stream live on my personal Facebook page. We also stream live on the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy's YouTube site, and we are available on all the podcast sites, so Spotify and SoundCloud and iTunes and so on. So go to those sites, like them, review them. And we are live at stream live at 1 to 2 p.m. every Monday at AM 1470 KBSN radio show studio in Moses Lake. Look for us then. And Dr. Amara, I really appreciate you being here with us, and we will be in touch later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Shawn.
Bye-bye.